Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's video is going to be all about returns. So it is that time of year where returns are especially bad. They're a problem all the time, but especially bad this time of year. So I wanted to discuss the reason that they are an issue, as well as maybe a couple tips to help avoid returns when possible. So now let's talk about why they are such a problem. Returns are something that businesses have had to deal with for a long time. They know about it, it's built into their bottom line, they kind of work through it. But only about 5 to 10% of in-store purchases are returned. The online world, as we know, is growing quite a bit and it has a lot more returns. So that number rises to 15 to about 40% for online returns, and clothing and shoes tend to fall into a 30 to 40% online return rate. We are talking about a lot of returns. In fact, last year, $100 billion of items were sent back. That's a lot of stuff. So what happens to those items once they're returned? There's a really great article in The Atlantic, and they say we can just do away with the notion that we send things back and they just get packaged again and resold. That rarely happens, especially for online purchases. So there are a few things that do tend to happen. Sometimes things are sent to a bulk retailer, broken down and sold for parts, or some of the parts are reused, and quite a bit of it ends up in an incinerator or a landfill. There's obviously a huge environmental impact and issue with this, but it's not only the items that are being discarded and not used again, it's also the actual environmental impact of shipping all of those things back. They're shipping back to a warehouse, or they're then getting shipped somewhere else. These items are kind of going all over the place, and they were initially shipped to you, right? So they have a very large journey, and very rarely are they actually meeting a person again at the end. Companies talk about supply chain logistics quite often, and it's something that has been worked on and has been, technology has come and enhanced it and tried to enhance supply chain, trying to get things to make less of a journey before they get to their customer. But very few people are starting to think about reverse logistics. So that is what happens when the item has made it to the person and they are now sending back. This process we know is not environmentally friendly. It's expensive. It costs a lot of money to ship things back. Plus then there has to be people who are going through all of the unwanted items. They're seeing what can be salvaged, what can't be. Have you actually returned the item that you said you were going to return? What is it? And sometimes you get sent back things that are not at all what those items were. So it's a whole process, and reverse logistics gets thrown to the wayside a lot of times. In fact, a lot of companies, if they're making stuff that's cheap enough, it costs them too much money to have you bother to send them back. They'll just refund you for it. In some instances, if you're buying like undergarments or beauty items, whatever it's gonna be, they can't resell them. That's considered unsanitary, and they have to throw them out, even if they're brand new, still in the packaging when you send them back. With reverse logistics, a lot of companies don't even pay attention to it. It's not regulated. There is no process where they have to pay attention to what they do with returns. And so companies don't even keep track of them. They just consider a loss or just a general like, oh, that's something we're not even paying attention to anymore. And so we don't even know. There could be so many more returns that are happening, and we definitely don't know what's really happening with all of those returns, but we do know that a large amount of them are not going to new owners. There's been a common practice that has happened over the last few years, which I think has increased returns quite a bit, and that's this idea of bracketing. So bracketing is something where you want to buy something online, but you're not sure which size, so you buy a size up and a size down of where you think you actually will fall. And then you keep the thing, hopefully, that fits you, and then you send the other ones back. But if those items are not getting resold, then actually you're just kind of wasting 2 or 3 items, depending on how many you bought of that same exact thing, rather than, just trying on that one and sending things back. This does not happen in every company, and it especially happens less in brick and mortar stores. So one of the tips that I would give you is, if you can return to an in-person store, please do. That way someone is actually looking at that item and potentially putting it right back on the shelf, rather than taking that item, getting it sent to a sorting facility. They're opening a ton of different stuff, figuring out what goes with what, and then it's so much easier to just throw it in the pile of, we're not going to even bother really dealing with this. Another tip to cut things down is to really try not to use that bracketing technique. And I know that's really difficult when you're trying something on at home online versus trying something on in store. It's really hard to know if something's going to fit you or not. So really trying to pay attention to reviews. Please look through reviews, look through the size chart. A lot of companies are starting to figure out that they need a more exact size chart and that a different size chart per garment is important. If you're talking fast fashion and they're getting thousands of new garments on their page, they're not going to update the size chart for all of them. But if you're going with maybe a more slow fashion company that has a smaller amount of goods, then that is more likely to happen. And it's really helpful when retailers are really good with their size chart and kind of break down and give you, even sometimes they'll have you enter your measurements and they'll say, we suggest this size. But reading through reviews, trying to look at the size chart and trying to order less items, especially less of the same item in different sizes, is a really helpful way to cut down on returns. In general, of course, being more mindful with what we buy and trying to consume less will certainly help cut down on returns, but that also goes for gift giving, right? Give people things they actually want, they're actually going to use. And if something doesn't work out for you, does it make sense to send that item back, or does it make sense to donate that item or give it to a friend? And by donating, make sure you're donating it to a place that will actually use it. Sell it to a consignment shop, sell it on Poshmark, that sort of thing. All of that can definitely help cut down on returns. Another thing I really suggest doing is looking through the company that you want to buy from, looking through their return policy. Are they charging you for a return, or are they shipping it back for free? If they're shipping it back for free, it is more likely that they are not going to give that back to a new customer. If they're having you pay for shipping, or they're having you send the item in yourself, or they're having to approve a return before you send it in, then that's a company who is probably paying a little bit more attention to their returns and hopefully making more ethical choices and environmentally friendly choices with what to do with those items. Especially if they're like, it has to be in pristine condition. It can be tried on, but not, used, or no real signs of use, that sort of thing. If they have strict policies, then hopefully we assume that there's a much better chance that they are actually selling that item again. Last thing to look for is to look for if they have a happy returns location. So happy returns isn't perfect, and it's only one of the different return options that are out there, but it's a place that you can go and take those items and drop them off rather than send them back individually. The more individual things we package, right, the worse it's going to be. If a Happy Returns collects these items on your behalf, sends all of those items from a week or so back to that company together, they have cut down on that carbon footprint. Of course, there's a carbon footprint for you to get that item to a Happy Returns location, so that needs to be weighed into the occasion. But if it's close to something that you were already going to, then it can be a really helpful thing to do. It's also great if you're returning something from more than one place and they both use a Happy Returns location. So that was just a brief look at the problem and a few quick tips that we can take to help ensure we are returning less items and shopping through companies whose values you support, who are paying attention to returns and reverse logistics and are trying to figure out not only how to cut those down so that it doesn't eat as much into their bottom line, but also to use them and redistribute them in a more ethical process, more sustainable process, is really important. So please do pay attention to what you buy and where you buy from, and support companies that support your values. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Please leave any questions and comments down below. I am happy to continue this conversation there, and I will see you in a future video. Bye.